All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about a very important foundational concept of synthesis. How do we take the law and once we have all of these separate little mini rules, how do we pull it all together into one cohesive rule? Synthesizing is important as we think about writing. Synthesizing is important as we think about outlining and preparing for finals. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we shall get started. All right. So the law is never defined by a single case, right? The law grows, it evolves over time. A single case can give you part of the picture, but you need multiple cases to really flesh out the law. And that is why in law school, you may study 5, 10, 20 cases just looking at the concept of negligence or battery. That's because, law professors learned a long time ago, just trying to educate students with one case, that's not really helpful because the law really is living, growing, evolving. So instead, we need you to think like a lawyer. We need you to interpret the law as it exists right now and think about ways that it can be improved. Law school works really well for puzzle solvers, right? Because it's all about assembling many parts into one large piece. Students are basically tested on their assembly skills, the ability to put the parts together. Synthesizing is just like that. You're putting all the pieces together and you're trying to connect them. So when you think about what's the law, there actually isn't a single book of legal rules or answers. As an attorney, to learn the law, you must look at various cases and synthesize the central rules for yourself. So I keep throwing this term around. Let me go ahead and define it. You need to learn how to construct a single rule of law from various sources. Usually it's cases. That's what synthesis is all about. The act of combining all the rules from multiple cases to devise a single rule. It lets the reader, it lets the law student know the collective meaning of all of these cases. So the first step in synthesizing information is to pull together all the cases reviewed on a single issue or element. Some people who are visual learners really like creating their own table or chart. Your syllabus may help as well, because if your professor did a decent syllabus, he or she has already grouped the cases under a particular category. Pay attention to your syllabus and the table of contents of your textbook. How are those cases grouped? What chapters do they fall under? You then want to divide all of your cases into categories, particularly by elements. Does each case seem to represent a different element of the rule? For example, let's say for my example, there are 3 elements in battery. Let's say those elements are intent, harmful or offensive contact with the person of another. When you are doing something like getting ready for your outline or writing a legal memo, you're going to, in your researching, start one at a time. So let me look at the cases that just deal with the element of intent. And I want to group those cases and figure out what the rule is as it relates to intent. What is it? How is it satisfied? Let me then take a look and group cases that deal with harmful or offensive contact. And what about cases that deal with just the person of another? So basically, you're breaking the law down into its essential components or elements. And once you have a better understanding what all they mean in depth, you're putting it back together again. So that's the assembly piece. Case books, all of your case books, no matter who you take, are edited in a way to illustrate a particular element. Now, in real life, most of your cases are going to talk about multiple elements at once, but your case books are neatly organized just to highlight one element. When you're thinking about synthesizing cases, don't try to merge all the elements together prematurely. So for example, don't synthesize cases that deals with intent with another case that deals with offensive contact in the battery example. First, figure out what is intent and synthesize those cases. The second step, once you have multiple cases that deal with the same element, then you can sort them by result. So let's say, back to the battery example and back at intent, you have 3 cases. You may have one pile for when the cases found intent, and another pile where the cases didn't find intent. And this is where charting actually may help if you're visual. Figure out the differences in the cases. Look for common threads or pattern that can help you define the rule. Synthesis really is a foundational skill for building your outlines and helping you do well in your finals. That's because the collective meaning of cases is much more important than a loose collection of case briefs. That's not what you want.
Okay, so I am back. I had a slight tech issue, but I wanted to get back and finish our discussion on synthesis. So I've already told you that it's very essential in terms of building your outlines and doing well in your finals. The collective meaning is, in fact, way more important than having a loose collection of case briefs. Having all of the cases in the world that you briefed is not going to help you in finals. You've got to synthesize all of that into an outline, note cards, flow chart, whatever is your learning style, to make sure you know the information for the final. Now, this example of synthesis is from a Professor Gregory Berry from the Howard Law School, and I thought it was really, really helpful. Professor Berry ignores a sign warning trespassers to keep out and enters Mr. Jones's land to smell his award-winning roses. The holding is that Professor Berry is liable for trespass. In the second case, Professor Berry ignores a sign warning trespassers to keep out and enters Mr. Jones' land seeking to escape a mob of angry law students bent on attacking him for giving them low grades. Held, Professor Berry not liable for trespass. And C, Professor Berry ignores a sign warning trespassers to keep out and enters Mr. Jones's land, seeking to escape a mob of angry law students bent on attacking him for giving them low grades. While evading his pursuers, Professor Berry accidentally tramples on Mr. Jones' award-winning roses. Held, Professor Berry liable for damages to roses. So the question you want to ask yourself is, what is the collective meaning of these three cases? We've got three different cases with three different conclusions. You want to try to look for the common threads. In each case, Professor Berry was trespassing on someone's land without permission, but we had different results. The decision maker considered different factors to modify the rule. So you may recall, based on our prior discussion of factors, factors are flexible considerations by the court. They're not requirements, but they're things that the court considers to determine if an element is satisfied. So in the first case, the proposition is that a person is liable for trespass if they enter someone's land without permission. The second case modifies the rule established in the first case. A person is relieved of liability from trespass when it's necessary to protect oneself from physical danger. And then we have a further refining of the rule. When someone trespasses out of necessity, they're still liable for any actual damage to the property. So now we have traced the development of the law. What is the collective meaning? A chart may be helpful. So here we've got trespass cases, some involve necessity, one involved property damage, and the liability determination was different in each. So if you're a visual learner, a chart may help. The collective synthesized rule would be a person who enters the land of another without permission is liable for trespass, except where entry is necessary to avoid physical danger, in which case a person is liable only for actual damage to the property. So that is your synthesized rule. In fact, that would be the rule that you would want to make sure is included in your outline. But that is just the foundation. Knowing and memorizing the rules alone is not enough in law school. You've got to know how to apply them to the fact pattern. So make sure either on your own or with your study group or with some of the people that you're meeting during the boot camp or orientation, go through hypotheticals that apply the rule. Now, synthesis is a common process. We do it every day. In the beginning, it's going to seem a little hard and very novel, but we do it all the time. Charting may help if you're dealing with a complex issue. It just requires practice. All right, so that is the end of my short talk today on synthesis. We'll talk more about it, and more importantly, we'll do some exercise to make sure we understand it well later on when we get together. Have a great day.